All right, we're a little early, because I am a disaster. Let's just put it at that. Whew. I do have water because I recognize that this is a very long poem. I think we're live. Let's double check on my phone. And I started a little early, so let's wait a little bit for people to join. I am indeed live, which I'm so nervous. Pounce is behind me. We'll see how long it takes for her to decide to join us. Who knows? Alright. Sorry, I am self involved and. Andy. Oh my gosh, Ashley. Hello. Ashley, of course, coming with first. Gawain. Still have a couple minutes before we start, but I'm working from this version. Welcome, Margot. And we've got just a little bit longer. Dabbing. So old. Alright, 1 o'clock. Here we go. Seaton Massey and the assault was cessed at Troy. The Borg Britoned and brent to bronze and asps. The Toke that tram of Tresson there wrought was tried for his treachery the truest on earth. Hit was Ennius, the Ethlin is high kind, that Scythian depressed provinces and patron become. Will nay of all the well of the West Isles, for rich to Romulus to Rome riches him swife. With great bobance, that burr he beings on first, and Nevens hit his own nome, as hit now hats. Titius to Tuscan and Teld begins, long a bird to Lombardy lifteth up homes. And fair over the French flood Felix Brutus, on money bunkers full broads Bretagne he sets with win, where were and rack and wonder beseeps his wants therein, and oft both bliss and blunder, full sket his gifted sin. And when this Bretagne was bigged by the burn rich, bold Brennan therein beareth that loften, in money turns time and that rotten, Mofairles on this fond, han fallen here oft. Than in any other that I wot, sin that ilk time. But of all that here bolt of Bretagne kings, I was Arthur the hendest, as I have heard tell, for the in answer and aired I at will to show, that a Sellian sight soon meant he told him, and an outrage a wenture of Arthur's wonders. If you will listen this lay but a little while, I shall tell it as I in town heard with tongue, as hit in sad and stocken, in story stiff and strong, with low letters lonken, and longed so has been long. This king lay at Camelot on Christmas, with money luftich lord, lads of the best. Rekenly of the Round Table, all the rich brother, with rich revel rights, and wretchless mirths. Their tourneyed talks by times full money, just full jollily this genteel knights. See then cared to the court carols to make, for there the fest was ilch full 15 days, with all the mets and the mirth that men couthevise, such glown and gregorious to hear, der dean upon day, dacing upon nights, always hap upon hay in halls and chambers, with lords and ladies at levis him thought. With all the well of the world they wond their samen, the most kid knights under Christus Selven, and the lovelokest ladies that ever have laden. And he the comlokest king that the court has, for all was of this fair folk in her first age on seal, the hapnest under heaven, King highest mon of weal. It were now great to Nevin, so hardy here on hill. Well, New Year was so yep that it was New Cumin. That day double on the desk was the doth served. For the king was cumin with knights to the hall, the chantray of the chapel sheved to an end. Lute cry was their cast of clerks and others, now well nated on with nivens full oft, and seeth and reach forth running to resh honsel. Ye had years gifts on high, yelled him beyond, debated busily about their gifts. Ladies laughed full loud, though they had lost hadden, and he that won was not wrought, but may ye will travel. All this mirth that they made unto the met time, when they had washen worthily, they went into set. The best burn I above, as it best seemed, when Gwenor full gay, graved in the meads, dressed on their desks, all about, small sendal besides, a cellar hill over, of tried to lose, of tars to pizzinach, that were embroidered and batten with the best gems, that might be proved a price, with pennies to buy and day, the comlookest to descry. Their glance with Ian grey, some loker that ever he say. Sothmot no man say, but Arthur was not ate till all were served. He was so jolly of his joyfulness, and somewhat childgard. His life liked him light, he loved the lass. Arthur, to lang lie to long sight, so busied him his young blood and his brain wild. And also another manner meved him eke, that he thir noble had nomen he would never et. That upon such dare day, ere him devised were, of some adventurous thing, of an uncouth tale, of some main meveril that he might trow, of alders of arms of other adventures. Others some say him besought of some sacred knight, to join with him in jousting, in jeopard to lay. Let life for life, live uchon other, as fortune would fulson, home the fair to have. This was king's countenance, where he in court were, at each fair's fest upon Freymain in hall. Therefore of face to fair, his sightless safe in stall, full yep in that new year, much mirth he was with all. Thus fair stones install the stiff king, his Selven, to cons before the high table of trifles full hand. Their gods Gawain was great Gwenor beside, and Algraven La Dermain on that other side sits, both the king's sisters' sons and full seeker knights. Bishop Badwin above begins the table, and Gawain, Euron's son, ate with himself. This were dight on the days and devilry served, and heathen money seekers say at the seaboard. Then the first course came with cracking of trumps, with money banter full bright, that thereby hanged. New nacre nose with the noble pipes, wild warbles and the white racket notes, that many herds full high half at her touch, dainties driven therewith, a full dare mets, for soon of the fresh and unsown fella dishes, that pine to find the place the people beforn, for to set the silver in that Sir So hadden on cloth, each laid as he loved himself, their lots without in loth. I too had dishes 12, good bear and bright bring with both. Now will I of her service say you no more, for ooh, which why may well weets no wants that there were, and other noise full new way believed. Hi Kayla, that the lewd might half leafod to cash, for an eth was the noise, not a whistle say. And the first course in the court kindly served, their halls in at the hall door a gleesh maester, and for the most unmold and measure high. For the swire to the swang and so swear on so thick, and his lens and his lime so long and so great. Half eaten and ard, I hope that he were. Both moan most I'll gates mean him to bind. And that the merriest in his muckle that might ride, for back and breast, all were his body's cern. Both his wand and his wast were worthily small, and all his features full wand and form that he had full clen, for wonder of his human had, set in his semblot sen, and he fared as freck and were fad, and over all anchor gren. And all grafed in green, this gum in his weds, a straight coat full straight but stuck on the sides, a mere mantle above, menstead within. With pelure pure the bird, the painful clan, with blight splendour full bright in his hold both, that was lots for his loaves and laid on his shoulders. Hem well had hose of that same green, that spennet on his spiller, clean spurs under, of bright gold upon silk boards barred full rich, and shoals under shanks their shalk rides, and all his vesture verily was clean verdure, both the bars of his belts and other blithe stones that were richly railed in his array clean. About himself in his saddle upon silk works, that were to tore floor to tell of his trifles behalf, that were embrailed above, with birds and flies, with gay gaudy of green, the gold eye amids, the pendants of his pature, the proud coupure, his mullanes and all the metal enamelled was then, the stirrups that he stood on stained of the same, and his arsons all after Ethel his shirts. That ever glimmered the glance of all grain stones, the full that he first on fin that ilks attain. A green horse great and thick, a steed full stiff to strain, and bald and breeded quick, to the gone he was full gain. Well gay was the gone, gerd and grain, and the hair of his head full his horse sweats. Fair fannet facts on befold his shoulders, a much bird as a busk over his breast henge. That with his highlight here, that of his head riches, was a vest all unbedorn above his elbows. That half his arms thereunder were hushed in the wise of a king's chapedos that closes his swire. The mane of that main horse, much to it like, well crest and kemmed, with knots full money, folded with Theodore above the fair gren. I a hair of the hair and other of gold. The tail and his topping tweening of a suit, and bound in both with a band of bright green, dubbed with full dare stones, as the dock lasted, seethen trowen with a tongue, outwore knocked aloft, their money bells full bright of brand's gold ringen, such a fold upon fold, in the frake that him rides, was never seen in that sail with sight ere that time with he. He looked so late as light, so said all that him see. It seemed as no moan might, upon, under his zenith tree. Whether had he no helm, no harbour, nother, ne no pisan, ne no plates that painted so arms. Thank you. Uh, ne no shaft, ne no sheld, to shrieve, ne to swite. But in his horns he had a horn bob, that is greatest in grain when graves are bar, and an axe in his other, a hoe and unmet. A sped of sparth to expound and spell, Crusoe so might. The length of an earnard, and the large head had. The grain of all grain still, and of gold hewen. The bits burnest bright with a brogue edge, as well shapen to share as sharp razors. The steel of a stiff staff, that stern heat be gripped, that was wound and worth earned to the wand's end, and all begraven with green and gracious works, a lace lapped about, that loped at the head. And so after the helm haft, halshed full oft, with tried tassels thereto tashed enoch. On bottoms the bright green braid and full reach, this hathel held as him, and the whole enters, derivand to the hedge dies. Did he no worth? Hals he never won, but hey he overlooked. The first word that he warp, where is, he said, the governor of this gang? Gladly I would see that saying might, and with himself speak reason. To-night he cast his eye, and railed him up and down. He stemmed, and con study, co walt their most renown. There was looking on length, the lewd to behold, for Ochmon had merveille quat his men he might, that a hathel and a horse might such a wheaten lach, as grown green as the grace and greener hit seemed. Then green a mole, on gold Gawain's brighter, all studied that there stood and stalked him here, with all the wonder of the world, what he wert should. For fell sigh had they same, but never such are. For phantom, for the folk here denned. Therefore to answer was our money awful freck, and all stoned at his Stephen Stancel settin, and all swoe silence their solly rich. As all were sleeped on sleep, so slaked her lots in high. I deem it not for all dudes, but soon for courtesy. But let him all shelled lutes cast upon that way. Then Arthur before the high dice said, adventure beholds, and reckonly him reverenced for what was he never, and said, why welcome it is to this palace, that head of this Osterethor I had. Light bluefish, a doon in the lang I the prey, and quot so thy will, as we shalt wit after. Nay, as help me, quoth the hathel, he that on high sits, to one and equal in this one him, it was not mine earns, but for the loss of the lead is lift upon so high, and thy burr and thy burns best are holden, safest under Stelgar, on steads to ride, the whitest and worthiest of the world's kind. Pray for to play with in other pure lakes, and here's kind courtesy, as I have heard carp. And that has waned me hider, iwis, at this time. You may be secker by this brooch that I bear here, that I pass as in pace, and no plight sesh, for as had I found it in fear, in fighting wise, I have a hauberge at home and a helm both, a shield and a sharp spear, shinnites bright, and with other weapons to weld I wend well else, but for I would not wear, my weds are softer. But if thou be so bold as all Burns tell him, thou will grant me be godly the govern I ask by rights. Arthur con ensoir, and said, Sir Cortes knight, if thou crave battle bear, here fails thou not to fight. Nay, phrase I no fight, and faith I the tell, hit arm about on this bench, but bearless childer. If I were hasped in arms on a head stye, here's no mon me to mock for might so wake. For thee I crave in this court at Christmas goman, for it is Yule and New Year, and here are yet money. If any so hardly in this house hold himself, be so bold in his blood, brain in his head, that dar stifely stroke a stroke for another, I shall give him my gifts of gisern rish, this axe that is hev enoch to handle as him likes. And I shall bid the first bar as bare as I sit, and if any freck be so fell to fond what I tell, be politely to me and latch this weapon. I quit claim hit forever, kept hit as his owen, and I shall staunt him on stroke, sit on his flate. Else the will dite me the dawn to dela him and other barley, and yet give him respite, a 12 month and a day, now high and let so tight, dare on a ring ought say. If he hem stoned on first, still a worth on. All the haired men in the hall, the high and the low, the rank on his raunche, him rooshed in his saddle, and runishly his red, e'en he railed about, bending his brisk bows becond grain, waved his bird for the weight could so rish. When none wold keep him with carp, he coughed full high, and rhymed him full richly, and right him to spake. What, is this Arthur's house? Quoth the Hathel then, that all the rouse friends of Thurs realm so money. Where's now your pride and your conquests, your Grindalk and your Graham and your great words? Now is the revel and the renown of the round table, overwhelmed with a word of unwise speech. For all dares for dread, without dinshewed. With this he laughed so loud that the lord graved, for blood shot for sham to his shire face. And Lair, he waxed as so wroth and wind, so did all that there were, the king as can be kind, that stood on their stiff mon there. And saiden, Hathel, by heaven thine asking is not, and as thou fully hast phrased, finds thee behoves. I know no home that is gas on the great words. Give me now thy gisern upon God's help, and I shall bathen thy bone that thou boden habs. Lightly leaps on him so, and lat at his horns. Then fiercely the other frake upon full lightis. Now has Arthur his axe, and the helm grips, and sternly stirs it about, that strike with his thought. The stiff mon aimed before stood upon the knight, here than any of the house by the head and more. With stern share that he stood and he stroked his beard, and with a countenance dry he drew down his coat. No more mate he dismayed for his main dints, that any burn upon bench that brought him to drink of wine. Gawain, that sits by the queen, to the king he can incline. I beseech now with Saucen, this melly not be mine. Wold ye reach lords, quoth Gawain to the king, bid me bow to this bench and stones by you year, that I without villain might void this table, that my leg lady liked not ill, I would come to your council before your court rich. For me think it's not seemly, as hits is so fnawen, that there's such an asking as heaven so high in your sail, that ye yourself be talentive, to take it to yourselven. Well, money so bode ye about upon bench sitten, that under heaven I hope, nor horror of will. Ye better bodies on bench their barret is red, I am wackest I wot, of wheat feederless, and less thorough of my life, collates to the soth. But so for much as you are mine I am only to praise, no bounty but your blood, I and my body know. And seethin this note is so nigh that not hits you foul, I framed hit at you first, fold as hit to me. And if I carp not comely, let all this court rich bout blame. Rich together come round, and seethin they redden all same, to rid king with crown, and give Gawain the game. Then commanded the king the knight to rise, he full radly uprose and rooshed him fair. Kneeled down before the king and catched the weapon. He lively hit him laughed, and lift up his hands, and gave him God's blessing, and gladly him bid. that his heart and his horn should hardly be both. Keep the cousin, quoth the king, that thou on Kiev sets, and if thou read him right, readily I trow, then thou shalt beat in the burr that he now shall beat after. Gawain goes to the game with Gissern in hand. He badly him beads, he bastes never the helder. Then carps to Sir Gawain, the knight in the green. Reforn we are fords, ere we fear pass. First I Hathel, how that thou hadst, that thou me tell truly as I tryst may, and God faith, quoth the good knight, Gawain I had. That bed be this buffet, whatso befalls after, and at this time 12 month take at thee another, with what weapon so thou wilt, and with no way else on life. That other answers again, Sir Gawain, so mote I thrive, as I am fairly fain, the stint that thou shalt drive. Begog, quoth the Green Knight, Sir Gawain me lives, but I shall fang at thy foost, as I have phrased here. And thou hast readily rehearsed, be resound full true, clanly all the covenant that I the king asked. Saft that thou shalt syker me, seg, be the throff, that thou shalt shesh me the self, whereso thou hopes that I may be fund and fold and fush so the wage. As thou dells me to-day before this doth rich. Wear the shield I will thee, quoth Gawain, where is thy place? I wot never where thou onies, be him that me wrought. Ne I know not the knight, thy court ne thy name. But teach me truly their toe, and tell me how those hats, and I shall wear all my white to win me better. And that I swear thee forsooth, and by my secret troth, quoth the Gom to the Green to Gawain to hand. If I tell truly, when I the tape have, and thou me smoothly hast smitten smartly the tash of my house and my home and mine owen nome, then may thou phrase my fair and forwards hold, and if I spend no sech, then spedst thou the better, for may long in thy lawn nate no fear but sook. That now Green told thee, and let's say thou knocks, gladly, sir, forsooth, quoth Grain, and his axe he strokes. The Green Knight lay upon ground, greatly him dresses, a little lit with the head, the lair he discovers, his long lovely locks he laid over his crown, let the naked neck to the notes shew. Gawain gripped his axe, and getters hit on high. The cave foot on the fold he before set, let him down lightly light on the naked, and the sharp of the shock shiders his bones, and shrank through the shire grease and shade hit on twine. That the bit of brown stale bolt on the ground, the fair head for the halch hit the earth. That fell hit foined with her fet, there hit forth rolled, the blood brayed for the body that blaked on the green, and nother faltered near the fell freck never the helder. Both sightly he struck forth upon stiff shonks, and runishly he brought out, there as rankles stolen. Lot to his lofty head, and lift hit up son, and seethen bows to his blanc, the bridle he catches. Steps into the stable and strides aloft, and his head by the hair in his own held. And as sadly as to say him in his saddle set, as none in hap he had him ailed, the heddles now instead, he braid his blook about, that ugly body that blade. Many of the him had doubts, be that his rounds were red. For the head in his hand he held up even. Towards the dearest on the desk he dresses the face, and lift up ill lads, and looked full broad, and held thus much with his mouth. And as you may now hear, look, Gawain, thou be great to go as thou hadst, and late as lily till thou may lewd find, and thou hast het in this hall around these nights. To the green chapel thou chose, I charge thee to foot, such as duty as hout served thou habst, to be ere to London on New Year's morn, the night of the green chapel, men knowing me money. For thee me for to find, if thou frayest, failst thou never. Therefore come, over a crown to be called the behoves. With a runish rout, the reins he turns, hauled out the Haldor, his head in his hands, that the fear of the flint flow, ne fro holds. To quoth Keith he became none there. Never more than the whists from Quethin he was wonnen, what then? The king and Gawain there, at that grain they laughed and gren, yet beraved was it full bare, a merveille among the men. The author, the Hend King, as hert had wonder, he net no semblet be sane, but full said full high to the comely Queen, which Cortes speech, dare dam today de may you never, well become such craft upon Christmas, laking of interludes to laugh and to sing, among this kind carols of knights and ladies. Nevertheless, to my met I may me well dress, for I've seen a Sally I may not forsake. He glanced upon Sir Gawain, and gainly he said, Now, sir, hang up thine axe, that has enough hewn. And hit was dawn upon above the desh, on Dosser to hang. There all men for all mivel might on hitlock, and be true title therefore to tell the wonder. Then they bowed aboard these burn together, the king and the good knights, and ken men him served. Of all dainties double as darest might file, with all manner of met and minstrelsy both. With well waltzed that day, till worth and end and lawns, for thank well Sir Gawain, for woth that thou ne wons, this adventure for to feign, that thou hast tan on horns. This Hansel has Arthur of adventures on first, in younger year, for he yearns yelping to hear. The him words were wan when they to set wenten, nor are they spoken of stern work, stuffer her horns. Gawain was glad to begin these drums in hall, but that the end be heavy, hath he no wonder. For that men be merry in minds when they have many drinks. A yearns a full wern, and yelled is never like. The forms of the finest mets, full selden, for they this yule override, and year after, and each season served after other. After Christmas come the crabbed Lenten, at that phrases flesh, with the fish and the food more simple. Both then and the weather of the word with winter hit threps, cold clingers a dune, clouds upliften. Share shades in the rain and the showers full warm, fells on fair flats, flowers their shoein. Both grounds and the grabs, green on her winds. Breeders booskin to bleed and brimlich singin', for solace of the soft summer that soothes thereafter be bonk, and blossoms born to bow, be roused rich and long. The notes nobly knock, our hair and words so long. After the season of summer, with the soft winds, Quin Separus stifles himself on seeds and herbs. Well a wind is the words that waxes the roots, when the donkey-dew drops upon the leaves. To buy the blissful blush of the bright sun, but the highs harvests and hardens him sown. Warns him for the winter to wax full ripe, he drives with draughts to dust for the rise, for the face of the folds to fly full high, roth winden in the welkin rassles the sun, the leaves lauken to the lind on the ground, and all grapes the graze that gren was air. Then all ripes and rots that rust on first, and thus yearn the year that yesterday's money. And winter wins again, and the world asks no fay. Till Michaelmas none was cumin with winter wage, was then thanketh Gawain full son of his Agnes voyage. Hi, Erkin. Yet quill all holiday with altar he lenge, and he made fair on the fest for the fracas sake. With much revel and rich of the round table, knights full courtiers and comely ladies, all for loof of that laid and longing they bear. But nevertheless, the later they nevens both mirth, many joys for that gentle japes their maiden. For after met with morning he mills Suzanne, and speaks of his passage, and partly he said, Now, liege lord of my life, I leave you ask. Ye know the cost of this case. Keep I no more to tell you tens thereof, never but trifle, but I am bound the burr barely to mourn, to see the gum of the green, as God will me waste. Then the best of the burr bowed together, Gawain and Eric and other full money, Sir Dovendale the Savage, the Duke de Clarence, Launcelot and Lionel and Lucan the Good, Sir Booth and Sir Bivder, big men both, and many other mightful, with Madder de la Poor. All this company of courts come the king near, for to counsel the knight with care at her heart. There was so much stern, dull driven in the sail, that were so worthy as the wines should wend on that errands. To dry a delful daint, and del no more with bronze. The knight made a god chair, and said, What should I want? Of destiny's dearth and dare, what may no mon do but fond? He dalls there all day, and dresses on the morn, asks early his arms, and all where they brought. First a tulle tapis, tight over the flates, and meech was the glid gare that glent there all floats. The sternmon steps thereon, and the steel hondels, dubbed in the doublet of their tar, and seethen crafty capito, closed aloft, that with a bright blanner was bounded within. Then set they the sabatons upon the sag foots. His legs lapped on steel with loofly greaves, with polanes pitched thereto, and policed full clane. About his knees nailed with knots of gold, quam cuisses then, that contleach closed. His thick trown thighs, with tongues to thatchlet, and seats in the brawn brine of the bright steel rings, imbued that way, upon wonk stoof, and well burnest brace upon his both arms, with gold couters and gay, and gloves of plate, and all the godly care that him gain should the tide. With reach coat armure, his gold spurs spend with pride, gird with a boat bronze full shore, with silk seine humble his side. When he was hasped in arms and his harness was rich, the less latchet over loathed Lemden gold. All harnessed as he was, he hearkened his masses, offered and honoured at the high altar. Sithen he comes the king and his court fairs, latches lovely the leve at his lords and ladies, and they him kissed and conveyed, bekend him to Christ. By that green goat's grave, and gird with a saddle, that gleams full gaily with money gold fringes. I care nail it full no, for that note's reached, that bridle barred about, with bright gold bounded. The peril of the pature, of the proud skirts, the corper and the coverter, accorded with the ersons, that all glittered and glaned, and was glame of the sun. Then hence he the helm, and hastily hid kisses, that was stapled stiffly and stopped within. It was high in his head, hast behind, with a lightly erson over the aventail, embroidened and bounded with the best gems, on broad silken board and bredens on sames. As puppets painted purving between, torters and truffles entailed so thick, as money brooms thereabout have been 7 winter in tune. The circle was more o' pry, that clipped his crown, of diamonds at Davies, that both were bright and brown. Then they shewed him the shield, that was of shire gules, with the pentagel to paint of pure gold wheeze. He braids hit the baldric, and the hull casts, that besemmed the say friendly fair. And quite the pentagel pens to that prince noble, I am intent you to tell, though Terry hit me shield. It is seen that Solomon sets him well, in beatening that of troth betitled his habs. For it is a figure that holds 5 points, and each line umbelaps and loops in the other. And a quare hit is endless, and English hit colon. Overall, as I hear, the endless not. 40 hit accords this night into clear arms. For I faithful in 5 and sever 5 sives. Gawain was for good knowen, and as gold pure, voided of each villainy, with virtues enormed, in motes. Fourthly, the Pentagon, he bare in shield and coat, and took of tall most true, and the gentlest knight of Lot. First he was found in fault in his 5 whites, and aye failed over the freak in his 5 fingers. And all his offence and fault was in the 5 wounds that Christ cat on the cross, as the crowd tells. And wherever this moan and melee was sad, he through thought was in that, through all other things, that all his forces he fong at 5 joys, at that the hand heaven quen had of her child. At this cause the knight comely had, in the inore half his shield, his image depainted, that when he blushed thereto his bled never paired, that fate 5 that I find in the frack use was fonchish and fellowship, horrible thing. He clan his cortes, croaked were never, and pity that past all points, his pure 5, were harder happed on that hathel than on any other. Now all these 5 sives, for sooth, were fettled on this night, and each one hashed in the other, that none enda held, and fished on 5 points that failed never. No sames in new seas, new sundred noter. Withouten and at any nook I knocker find, wherever the gammon began and glowed on bend, therefore on his chin shelpen shoppen was the knot. Really was red gold upon red gules. That was the perpenticle with the people called with lore. Now grafed is Gawain grey, and lot his lance right there, and give him all good day he went for evermore. He spared the sea with the spears and sprung on his way, so stiff that's none fair, stroke out thereafter. All the say that Semley sate and Hareton, said soothly all the same sage still other. Carant for that comely be Christ, he does say, that thou, lewd, shall be lost, that art of like noble. To find his fair upon fold and faith is not eth. Where Loker that hath wrought, hath more with Ben, and hath died younger der Duke to have worth. A lowland letter of leads and loaned him was Sem, and so had better half than to brighten not. Howat with an elvish moan for unguard pride, who know ever any such king, such counsel to take, as knights and cavalations in Christmas bones. Well, much was the warm weather that Walter Dauphin, when that seemly sire sought to throw wains that day. He made none abode, both whitely went his way. Mony wilsome way he rode, that boke I heard say. Now rides with strength through the realm of Log, Sir Gawain of God's have, though hem is no man thoughts. Of Loodles along he langs on nights, there he phones not him, before the fair that he liked. Had he no fair, but as full be freighten down. Need to go but God be gate swift to carp, till that he neighed full nay into the North Wales, all to the Isles of Anglesey on late half through halls, and fair over the fords of the Forlorns, over the holy head, till he had eft Bonk. In the wilderness of Wirral, wound there but late, that utter God and gone, with good heart loved. And aye he framed as he fared at frakes that he met, that they had heard any carp of night's green, and any ground thereabout of the green chapel, and all nicked him with nay, that never in her life they say never no say that was of such hues, that of green. The knight took great strange, and money and bonk and ben, his share full of conchonge, that chapel ere he might seen. Many cleef he overclaim and contrary strange, fair floatin' for his friends friendly he rides. At each worth other water, there the wye passed. He found a foo him before, both fairly it were. And that so full, so fair, that fate him behold. So many they be months fair the moon finds. Hits were tore, foretell, and tenth dull. Some with worms he were, and with wolves alls. Some while with wild woes that wond in the nar. Both with bulls and bears, and boars other while. And attained that him and led of the high fell. Ned he been duty and dry, and Drayton had served, to tell that he had been dead and draped full oft. For where raft him, not so much that winter was worse, when the cold clear water for the clouds shed, and frares his fall might to befall earth, nor slain with the sweat he slept in his urns, mo nights that in nog in naked rocks. There is clatter for the crests of the cold-born wrens, and hanged high over his head in the hard easel lights. Thus in peril and pain and plights full hard, be contrary carves the night style, Christmas Eve and all one, the night while the tide to Mary made his mon, that ho him ride, to wis him soon come wand. By a mount on the morn, merrily he rides into a forest full depth that fairly was wide. High hills on each a have, and holt wolds under, of horos, full ho 100 together. The hazel and hawthorn were hold a salmon, with rough raged moss, railed anywhere, with money breeds and blafed upon bare twigs that piteously there piped for pine and the cold. The gnome on gringlet glides him under, though money mizzy mare, mon on him once. Carans for his costs, lest he never shailed, to see the service of that sire, that on the self-night, of a bird was born, over bear to quell. And therefore seeking, he said, I beseech the Lord, and of Mary, that mildest mother so dear, of some ever there highly I might hear mass, and my matins to mourn meekly I ask. And thereto pressly I pray my pater and ave and cred. He wrote in his prayer and cried for his Messiah. He saying to him in safe sare, and said, Christ me sped. Nay, he swained himself sag, but try, ere he was war in the wood and won in a moat. Above a land and a law locking under bows, of money bore leech, bull about be the ditches, a castle of come locusts that ever night a gate, peached on a prayer, a park all about, with a piked palais, pines full thick, that umbete money, tremont than 2 mile, that hold on that side, the hathel advised, as it shimmered and shone through the shire oaks. Then he handily of his helm, and highly he spons, Jesus and Saint Gillian, that gentle are both, that courteously had him kide, and his cry hearkens, now bon hoster cut the burn, I beseech you yet. Then to guards he to Gringlet with the gilt hellas, as he full chauncely has chosen the chafe gates, that brought Brumley the burns the bride ended in haste. The bride was Brumley abraid, the gates were soaken fast, the walls were well arrayed, he to weens blast. The burns bode on a blanc, that unbancoved, of the deep double ditch that drove her to the place. The wall bode in the water wondly deep, and eft at full huge heights, hit held on the loft, of hard-hewn stone up to the tables. A band under the battlement in the best low, and seethen garrets full gale gathered between, with money looply looped that looped in full clean, a better barbition that burns blushed upon never. And innermore he beheld that hull full high, towers held in between, turche full thick, fair fiefels that fied and fairly so long, with corvon browns and craftily slay. Chalkwits chimes their ches he anog, upon bastel roads that flanked full quite, so many picknell painted with a powdered aquel. Upon the castle carnels clambered so thick, that pared out of parpure purely it seems, and the fry freck on the full hit fair and ocht not thoughts. If he might cover to calm the cloister within, to herber in the hostel while he lay vest, Avina. He called, and soon there come a porter pure pleasant, on the wall his earned his nom, and hails the knight errant. Good sir, quoth Gawain, wouldst thou go to mine errands to the high lord of this house, Herbert Crave? Yea, Peter, quoth the porter, and purely I trow, that ye be why welcome to win while you likes. Then yet the why yearn and come again swithe, and folk freely him with to flong the night. They lay down the great draught and darily out yeden, and kneeled down on her knees upon the cold earth to welcome this ilk why, as worthy him thought, that ilden home the broad late, yart up wide, as he raised reckonly and rode over the brae. Sir sees him, says by saddle, quell he lights, and seeth and stabled his said Steve men in aught. Knights and squires come and then, for to bring the spur with blease into the hall. When he hath up his helmet, their hide and all, for the hence his at horns, the hands to servant. His brand and his blazon both they taken. They hails it his he full handily, though to hapless is shown. And many proud men there pressed that prince to honour. All hasp in his hay wait to haul him one. Their fair fire and upon flit fiercely, brands. Then the lord of the lads for his chamber, for to met with menst the moan to the floor. He said, You are welcome to win as you likes. That here is all your win to have at your will and weld. Grant mercy, quoth Gawain, their Christ hit yow for eld, as frets that seem fain, other in arms confelled. Gawain glides on the gum that godly him grets, and thus hit a bold burn that the burr agats, a hoe cattle for the nons, and high all day, but bright was his beard, and all bever hued. Stern stiff on the straithen of stalwart shanks, Phil face at the fire, and frails his speech, as well him seems forsoth, as besay thoughts, to leg a lordship and leave lewds full good. The lord him shards to a chamber, and chiefly commands to deliver him a lewd, him luely to serve. And there a bone at his boat's burns enoch, that brought him to bright bower, their bedding was noble, of courtings of clean silk, with clear good hems, of covertures full curious with comely panes, of bright blandmer above, and broad and besent, rudes renauds on ropes, red gold rings, taps tight the woo of Thule and tars, and under fet on the flat the full one suit. There he was disployed with speeches of mirth. The burn of his brooning of sprite weds, reached ropes full rack rent him broten, for to charge and to change and to chose of the best. Soon as he unhent, and happed therein, that set on him seemly, with salon skirts. The ver on his visage verily it seemed, well nigh to a chapel all on hus. Lowland and loofly all his limbs under, that a comlocker knight never creased made him thought. Whether in world he were, he seemed as he mought, be prince without impair, in feld and the fell men fought. A chair before the chimney, their charcoal brands, was grated for Sir Gawain, greatly with cloves, withens on quell points that coins were broth, and then a mare mantle was on that mon cast, of a brown blond embroidered full rich, and fair fold within with the fells of the best. All of ermine and erd his hoed of the same, and set on that settle semblage rich, that it chalked him chiefly, and then his chair mended. Son was telded at a table of trestles full fair, clad with a clean cloth that clear queet sheed, snap and salure and sliver and spoons. That why wished at his will and went to his met, says him served seemly enough, with Sir Sues and set, a sound of the best, double felled at his falls and fell hidden fishes. Some bacon and bread, some broad on the glids, some softened, some in so savored with spices, and so sauces, so slay that the say liked. The freck called hit at fist full frailly and oft, full handly when all the hapless rehaid him at once his hand. This penance now ye take, and apt it shall mend, that moan much mirth on could make, for when in his head that went. Then was spied and spurred upon sparewise, bepreved points of that prince put to himself, that he beknew contrasely of the court that he were, that Ethel Arthur that hand held his home. That is the rich Ryle king of the Round Table, and his was Waven Gawain himself that in one seats, come into the Christmas at case that him that lamed, when the lord had learned that he lewd had. Lord, he laughed thereat, so left him thought, and all the men in that moat made in much joy to appear in his presence presently that time. that all prize and prowess and pursuit theirs, appends to his person and praised as ever, before all men mould his mensch is the most. Which say full softly said to his fair, now shall we seemly to slate of those, and the tacheless verms a talking noble. Which sped in the speech and spurred may we learn, sin we have found in that fine father of nurture. God has given us his great godly forsooth, that such a jest Gawain grants us to have. When Burns blithe of his birth shall sit and sing, and many of many's mare, this burn now shall us bring. I hope that many him here shall learn of lift-taking. By the dinner was done, and that there up, it was nigh at the night, nay at the time. Chaplains the chapels chosen the gates, ruined full richly, right as they should. To the hearsome evening song of the high tide, the lords lout thereto, and the lady alls. Into a comely closet quaintly he enters. Gawain glides full gay and goes better song. The lord latches him by the lap and catches, and leads him to the sit. Rose, at least you're here. And coothly him knows and calls him numb, and said he was the welcomest squire of the world, and he him thanked throughly and utter hushed other. And set and soberly summon the service while, then list the lady to look on the knight, then comb of her closet with money clear birds, who was fairest and fell in flesh and of lyre, and of compass and colour of costas of all other. And whenever winor, as the why thought, he chest through the chancellor to cherish that hens. And other lady here, led by lift hand, that was older than ho, and an unseen it seems, and highly honoured with the hapless about, but unlike to look that ladies were. For if the young was yep, Yule was that of the other, rich red on that railed a queer. Rich ronkled checks that on the other rolled, kerchiefs that with of that on with money clear pearls, her breasts and her bright throat were bare displayed, chonshire than snow that sheds on some hills. That other with a gorger was garred over the swire, chambled over her blake chin with the chalk quit veils. Her fronts folded in silk and folded a queer, turret and traileted with trifles about. That's not was bare of that bird block the break burrows, between een and menays the naked lips, and those were sour to see and silly blared. The men's lady and mould, mon her may here called to forgoat. Her body was short and thick, her buttocks pale and broad, more liquorous on to like, that was show haid on lord. When Gawain glight on that gay, that graciously looked, with lev lat and the lord he lent him a ways, the older he hails, and held in full low, the love loker he laps a little in arms. He kisses her comely and knightly, and he mills. They caven him of acquaintance, and he quick asks to be her servant softly, if he himself liked. They ta'en him between him, with talking him leaden, to chamber to chimney and chafly they asken. Spices that unsparely men sped home to bring, and the winnelich win therewith each time. The lord Lufleach leaps full oft, mean mirth to be made upon money sives. Hence heftly of his hold on the spare hanged, that wains him to win the worship thereof, that most mirth me got, may of that Christmas while, and I shall fond be to my faith, to feature with the best, ere me wants to wed with the help of my friends. Thus with light and lofts the lords who may take mates, for to glade Sir Gawain with goms in the hall that night, so that it was time, the lord commanded flight, Sir Gawain his lev con nime, and to his bent him dight. On the morn, as each mon minds what time, that darkened for our destiny today was born, well waxes in each a one of in world for his sake, so did it here on that daintiest money. Both at maize and at melee, messes full quaint, derf men upon desk dressed of the best, the old unchewn wife, as to no sits, the lord Lufley her by lens as I trow, Gawain and the gay birds together they set. Even in maids, at the mess metly come, and Seaton threw all the sail as him best seems. Be ush grons at his degree greatly was served. There was met, there was mirth, there was much joy, that foretell thereof hitmen there were. And to point it I pined me peradventure, but yet I wot that Gawain and the whale bur such comforts of her company kiten together. Though her dare dalliance of her dern words, with clean cortese carp close for fear, that her play was passons upon Prince Drummond and Veres, trumps and nakeries, much piping their repairs, Uchmon tented his, and they too tented theirs. Much do't was there driven that day and that other, and the dried as though throng and thereafter. The joy of St. John's Day was gentle to hear, and was the last of the lake ludes their thoughten. There were jests to go upon in the grey morn. Fourthly wonderly they look, from the wind drochten, danced full drayly with their carols. At the last, when it was lake, they locken her lave, Uchon to wind on his way that was strange. Gawain gave him good day, and good morn him lunch, led him to his chamber, the chimney besides. And there he draws him on dry, and dearly him thanks of the wind worship that he him waved had, as to honour his house on that high tide, and emblaze his burr with bell cheer. It was, Sir Quill, I love, me worths the better, that Gawain has been my guest at God's owen feast. Grant mercy, sir, quoth Gawain, and God fate. Thank you. God fate it is yours. All the honour is yours, Owain. The Hey King, you yelled. And I am why your will to worch your hest, and I am there too, and high and low be right. The Lord fast can him pain to hold longer the night. To him answers Gawain, by none the way he might. Then framed at the frakeful fair at himselven, quod could serve, that had him driven at their time, so kenly fro the king's court to care out his one. Ere the holidays, Holly were hallet out of town, forsooth, sir, quoth the say, ye sayn both the troth, aught high earns and hasty May had fro the wands. For I am summoned myself to seach at a pace. I know what in the world were the odds to win hit to find. I know but if I hit ne might on New Year's morn, for all the lawns in with love, so me or Lord help. Forthy, sir, this inquest I require you here, that ye may tell me with troth if you tale heard of the Green Chapel, where it's on ground stones, and of the knights that it keeps, the colour of green. There was stabled by statutes, as Stephen as between, two met that mon at the mare, if I might last, and of that ilk New Year, bought naked but now once. And I would look on that lad if God me wold, Glodlooker be God's son, than any God weld. For thee, wise, be your will, whence me behoves. Nath I now busy both spare thee days, and meals fain to fail fay at faily man errand. Then liked, quoth the Lord, now lang by the behooves, for I shall teach you to determine by the time's ends. The Green Chapel upon Grode, grave you no more, but ye shall be in your bed, burn and the ness. While 4th days, and Ferric on the morn first of the year, and come to the mark on mid-morn, to make what you liked and spend. Dowels while New Year's Day, and rice and rakes ben. My shall and you set in way. It is not to mile hen. Then Gawain was full glad, and gumly he laughed. Now I thank you thrivingly through all other thing. Now achieved is my chance, I shall at your will, doel and else quanto ye demon. Then cessed him to the sire, and set him beside, that the ladies be fat, and like him the better. There is some solace by himself still, the Lord let for lofts so to merry. And why the wold of his wet, ne wist what he might. Then he carped to the knight, crying loud, Ye undeems to the dead, but I beat. Will ye halt this hess here at thy wands? Hello. Okay, where was I? For ye have travelled, quoth the tolk, toe into fair, and the seathen walked me with, ye are no wearest. Nother of sustenance, ne of sleep, soth ye know. Ye shall in lang in your loft and lie in your ess, to morn while the mesquile, and to met wend, and ye will with my wife, that with you shall sit, and comfort you with company till I court horn. Ye land and I shall early rise, on hunting will I wend, Gawain grants all the eyes, him held hand and as the hand. Yet fear, quoth the Freke, afford we make. Whatsoever I win in the world, his forth is to yours, and what check do so arrive, challenge me, thereforn. Swat swept we so, Sarway with troth. Quether load, so limp lair on other better. By God, quoth Gawain the good, I grant verily, that you list for to lake, left hit me, thanks. Who brings us this beverage, this bargain is masked. So said the lord of that lad, they laughed at John. They drunken and deadly, and daten and deekdal. These lords and ladies, qual that time liked, and seethen with Frenchish fair and fair looks. They stood and stemmed and stylish speaking, kissed full comely and cacked in her lave, with money loot full lights and Leman's torches, which burn so his bed, and was brought at the last full soft. To bed yet who they yet, recorded covenants oft, the old lord of that load, quoth, well had lake aloft. I have to pour myself another cup of water, but Alex. Yeah, Alex does speak in like pure jokes 90% of the time. Full early before the day folk up reason, yes, that's so old, her grums they called him. And that they both kin of Billy belonged to Sadle, tief in her tapes, truce in her mails, reaching heaven to the reached, the ride well all arrayed. Leppin up lightly, locking her bridles, Ochwa in her way, there him well liked. The live lord of the lawn was not the last, arrayed for the riding with rankles full money, and a stop hastily, when he had heard mass, with bugle to Bentfeld he boasts blithe, that any daylight gleamed upon earth, he with his hapless on high horses wearing. Then these chasseurs that coupled her horns, unclosed the kennel door and coughten throat, blew blithely in bugles on their bermots, bracious bade their four and brim's nose mate, and they chastied and chaired on chasing that went the hundredth of hunters, as I have heard tale of the best. To Tristert fierce yachts, couples coons of kest, there rose for blast god, Gret's reared in that forest. At the first quath of the quest quacked in the wild, there draught in the dale doted for dread. Hides to the high, both heatherly they were stayed with the stable that stoutly astride, that they hurt half the gates with the high heads. The bram buttes also with horror broad pains, for the frey lord have to fend and firm some time, that there should no moan mev to the mailed ear. The hinds were halden with hay and war, that was driven with Gret's deans dip slades. There might mon slade that slipped slanting of ar. At each wind, upon their weds wrapped in a flon, that bigly boats with the brawn of full broad heads. What, that Brian and Bledden, be bonks by dayan, as Irish shells and as res handfuls, hunters with high horns hasted him after, with such a cock and cry as Cleves had in Brewston. What while so a taped wise that shot was all to race and rent at the recite. Be thy were tented at the high and taste to the waitress. The leads were so learned at the low tristers, and the greyhound so great, that crefton him blithe, and him to fish as fast as Freke might look their right. The lords for blithe a bloy, for oft con launce and light, and draught the day with joy, thus to the dark night. Thus lakes this lord and leans towards Eves, and Gawain the good morn and gay bed lies. Lurks while the daylight learned on the wows, under coverture full clear courtins about. And as in slumbering he lowed, slyly he heard a little din at his door, and earnly upon He helps his head out the cloves and cornered the curtain he caught up a little, and waits warily there was what he might. It was the lady, loftiless to behold, that drew the door after her, full sternly and still, and bowed toward the bed and the burn shamed, and laid him down listily, and let as he slept. And Ho stepped stilly and still to his bed, cast up the curtain and crept within, and set her full softly on the bed sid, and lang there silly long to look when he wakened. The late lurked in a full long while, compassed in his conscience to quat their might, mave other amount to murvey him thoughts. But yet he said himself, more semly hit were to spy with my spell in space quat with wold. Then he wakened in wrath and towards her turned, and then looked his eyelids, and let as him wondered, and saying to him as by his saw to savour to worth with hands, with chine and with cheek full sweets, both quit and red and blonde, full loftily conholet, with lips small lagond. Good morn, Sir Gawain, said that gay lady. Y'are a sleeper and slee, that mon may sly hider. Now are ye ten a sit, both true as may shap? I shall bind you in your bed that ye be traced. I'll laugh in the lady louse aboards. Good morn, gay, quoth Gawain the blithe. Me shall worth out you will, and that me well lifes, for I yelled me yetherly in ye after grace. That is the best, be my dome, for me be hope's need. And thus he bordered again with many a blithe laughter. But will ye, lovely lady, then leave me, grants, to depreach the treason and pray him to rise? I would bow of the sped and bust me better. I should keever the more comfort to carp you with. Nay, forsooth, bow sir, said the sweet, ye shall not rise out your bed, I reach you better. I shall keep you here that other half alls, and seeth and carp with my knights as I have. For I win well, Sir Gawain ye are, that all the world worships, whereso you ride. Your honour, your handy lake is handily praised, with lords, with ladies, with all that lie fair. And now you are here, wise, and we but are one. My lord and his laids are on Lethen fair. Other burns in her beddle, and my birds alls. The door drawn and dit with a dur hasp, and seethen I have in this house him that all lives. I shall wear my way a whale, what heat lasts with tale. You are welcome to my core, your Aaron won't a whale. Me behoves a fine force your servant be and shall. In good faith, quoth Gawain, gain hit me thanks, though I be not that he that you speak in, to reach with such reverence as you research here. But I am why and worthy I wot well myselven. By God, I were glad in you God's bought. At other at service that I set might. To the pleasance of your pre, it were pure joy. In good faith, Sir Gawain, quoth the gay lady, the priest in the prowess that pleases all other. If I lacked other set at light, it were dwittle dainty. Both hit our ladies enough that liver was nouth. Half the hand in her hold as have there. To dally with dearly your dainty words, heaver him comforts, and colon her cares. Then much of the garrison other gold that they haven, but I love the ilk lord that leaves halts. I have tit wholly in my hands that all desires their grace. Show made him great chair, that was so fair a face, the knight with speeches scare answered each to a case. Madame, quoth the merry mon, marry you yelled, for I have founden in God faith, you's Francis Milbel, and other full much of folk fongans for horders, for both the dainty that they dellen for my discertness never. It is the worship of yourself that not spell welcomes. By Mary, quoth the minstrel, me think it's another, for I were worth at the wool of Winin Alv, and all the well of the world were in my hands, and I should cheapen and chose to sheave me a lord, for the cost that I have known upon the night here. Of beauty endeavour not, in blithes and bloats, But I have her heckens, and halt it's her true. There should no frick unfold before you be chosen. It is worthy, quoth the why. Ye have wailed well better, but I am proud of the priest that you have put on me, and soberly your servant my sovereign I hold you, and your knight I become, Christ you forward, and that my maid of much quat till mid-morn paced, and I the lady let a like it a him loved too much, that fair feck fared with defence and feted full fair, that hoe were birds brightest in the burn of mean had. The last loof in his load, the for lore he sought baton. The dunst that should him dave, and needs it must be done. The lady then speak of lave, he granted her full son. Then he gave him good day, and with a glance laughed, as Hostod stunned him with full store words, now that he sped each the speech this sporty yelled. Both that ye be Gawain, it goes not in mind. Wherefore, quoth the freck, and freshly he asks. Fared was he had failed in form of casts, but the bird him blessed, and bid this child say, so good as Gawain gainly is held him, and courtesy is closed so clean in himself. Could not be lightly have langed so long with a lady. Both he crazed the course bit his courtesy by some touch of some trifle at some tale's end. Then quoth Gawain, it is worth as you like. I shall kiss at your commandment, as a knight fails, and fire, lest he displease you, so plead hit no more. He comes near with that, and catches him in her arms. Lutes leftly adorn, and the lutes kisses. They comely be kind unto Christ to utter another. But is forth at the door with doubt and more. As he reaches him to rise and rapes him some, comes to him's chamberlain, closes his wed, bowed forth when he was bound, blithely to mass. And then he moved to his met, mentally him kept, and made merrily all day the moon raised with game. Was never fair wrong between so ding a dam. The elder and the young, much solace set they the same. And the lord of the land is went of his games to hunt in holts and heath at Hind's Bahrain. Such a stone he there so by that sooner held it, of dos another dare to dem their wonder. Then firstly they flocked in, folk at the last, and quickly to quelled there a care they made. The best bowed thereto with burns enough, gathered the gratis of grace what there were, and did in him darely undo as the dead asks, searched him as the assay assumed that were. 2 fingers they found of the foulest of ale, Seaton they sleep the slough cess of the arbor, shaved with a sharp knife and the sharp knitten. Seaton reads but the fair limbs and the rent of the hide. Then break they the bells out token, listily for lacing their lure of the knots. They griped in the guard's antrum and gravely departed. There was songs for the windhull and wont at the goots. They share they out the shoulders with her sharp knives. Hailed him by a little hole to have whole sides. Seaton brightened by the breast, Braden hit entwine. And after the gargaloon begins on then, rives it up redly right to the bright. Voids at the adventures and verily offer all to the rhymes by the ribs redly they lost. So right there of by resound by the rig bones, even then to the haunch that hens all salmon. And heaven hit up all whole and when hit out of there, and that they name for the nobles be known, as I true be kind. By the brights all of the ties, the laps they launce behind, to hew it and to they highs, be the babcon too and bide. Both the head and the hulls they hewn of then, and seaton sunder that's of the seeds freeten for the chain. And the corbels fee they cast in the grave, then thurled they another thick side through by the ribe, and hanged then another by hose for the birch. Each freck for his fees, for falls for to have, upon fell of the fair, best fed they their hones. With the lever and the lights, the leather of the paunches, the bread bathed in blood blends, their amongs. Baldly they blew fries, Bathe their roaches, sit and thong their her flesh, fold into home, strike on full stoutly money stiff motes. Be that the daylight was done, that Duke was all wonnen, into the comely castle, there was the night bites full still. With bliss and bright for bet, the lord is all comen there till, when Gawain with him met, there was bolt well at will. Then commanded the lord into that sail salmon all the many, both the ladies and low to light with their birds. Before all the folk in the fet his breads, verily his venison to fetch him beforen. And all godly and gammon Gawain he called, teach him to the tales of full tate besties, shoes him the sherry grace shorn upon ribes. How pays you this play, have I priest won? Have I thravenly thonk, through my craft served? Yea, awise, quoth the other, that other way. Here's waith fairest, and I say the 7 here is the season of winter. And I'll give you, Gawain, quoth the man then, for by accord of covenant you crave it as your own. This is sooth, quoth the I say you that ilk, and I have worthily won this one's within. Awise with all gods, will his worthiness to yours, he has his fair halls in his arms within, and kisses him as comely as he could wise. Implying I'm not also an armor work nerd. That yow there's my chevalance, I sheft no more, I wowish hit sing stuff finely, that feller hit were. It is God, quoth the godmon, grant mercy therefore. It may be such, it is better, you me brave would, wherein you wong this ill quay belittle of yourself. That was not forward, quoth he, phrase to me no more, for ye have tan that you tides, trow none other ye mo. They laughed and made him blithe, with lots their words are low, to sober they yede as swithe, with daints nay no, and seated by the chimney in chamber they sat in, where's the walls weighed to wham him oft. And eft in her boarding by they bathen in the morn, to fill in the same forwards that they before maiden, the chance so betides her javants to change. They accorded of the covenants before the court isle. The beverage was brought forth and board at the time. Then they lovely legends live at the last, which burned to his bed bust belive. By the cock had crowen, and cackled both try. The lord was lopen of his bed, the loads each one. So that the met and mass was meritly delivered, but doth dressed of the wood, ere I sprangled to chance. Hey with hunt and with horns, though plains that they pass in a space. Uncoupled among the thorns, rashes that ran on race. Soon they call of a cast on crusade, the hunt rehades the hounds that her smains, wild words him warp out with a rast nonce. The hounds that hit herd hasted thither swift, and fell in its fast the forts 40 at once. Then such a glaver and glam of gittered rashes rushed the rochers rungen about, hunters him hardened with horns and with mouth. Then all ensemble swayed together, between a flush in that firth at Fro crag, and a knots by a cliff at the care side. There's rusher and delay was taken. They fared into the finding and fraked him after. The ambition to the gnar and the knots both, while that wisten within him helmet were. The best that there breved was with the bloodhounds. Then they baten on the boost and bade him uprise, and he unsoundly outsought sage him overwards. On the silkos swanged out there, long seath and fro the sounder that sought it fold, for he was brem bore other gratis. Full green when he grains, then graved money, for three at the first thrust he trot to earth, and sped him forth, sped bout spite more. This other hallowed high, full high, and hey, hey, cried, hadn't horns to mouth, headily rechatted. Money was the marly mouth of men and hounds, that bursts after the spore with boasts and with nose to quell. Full oft he bides the bay, and mains the mute in mell. He hurts of the hounds, and they full yammerly yell and yall. Shots to shot at him showant of then, halds to him over her ours, and hitten him oft. But the points pared at the peath that python his shells, and at the bards of his brow bitten unwalled, that the shaven shaft shindered and passes, the head helped assaying whatsoever hit it. But when the Danes him dared of his dry strokes, then brainwood for bait on burns he raises, hurts him full heterly, therefore he has, and many hours thereat on light drowen. But the lord of the night horse launches him after, as burn bold upon bent his bugle he flows. He rechatted and rode through rounds full thick, swans his wild swin till the soon shafted. This day with this ilk the dead they driven on the ways, while her looflich lady lies in his bed, Gawain gravely at home and gares full reach of hue. The lady not forte, for come to him to salute, for early he was him out, his mode for a remue. How comes to the courtin, and at the night totes, Sir Gawain her welcomes worthy and first, and ho him yelled again full yearn of her words, sets her softly by his side, and swithely he laughs, and with a lifty look he laid him these words, Sir, if ye be Gawain, wonder me thinks, why is that so well rast away to God, and comes not to my of company to the costs undertake? And if mon kens yo him to know, ye cast hum of your mind, that has 14 yet that yesterday I taught, by all the truest token of talk that I count. What is that? Quoth the why. It was I what never, if it be so that brave, the blame is mine own. Yet I kenned you of kissing, quoth the Clare then. So countenance is couth, quickly to claim, that becomes each knight that courtesy uses. Do way, quoth the Dare Mon, my dare the speech, for the durst that I not do, lest I devade were. If I were warned, I were wrong, and wise if I be preferred. But fay, quoth the mere wife, ye may not be warned. Ye are safe enough to constrain with strength, if you likes. If any were so villainous that ye're devay wold, ye be God, quoth Gawain, good is your speech. But threat is unthravened and bed at that there are langed. And each gift is given not with goodwill, and I am at your commandment to kiss when you likes. You may latch when you like, and leave when you thinks in space. The lady lets a doon and comely kisses his face. Much speech they there expound of Druin's gram and grace. I wold wit at you why, that worthy there said, and you recked not therewith what were the shale, that so young and so yep, and ye at this time so courtesy, so knightly, as you are knowen aught, and of all chivalry to chose, the chief thing alost, is the well life of Luke, the letterer of arms. For to tell of this telling of this true knights, it is the tightlet token of the text her works. How lets for her life, loof her leaves han answered, and deared for her drury dewful stones, and after wanged for her waller, and voided her care. And brought blease into bore with bounties her oren, and ye are knights come lost keat of your eld. Your word and your worship walks aquare, and I have Satan by yourself, her search wise. Ye heard I never of your herd held no words, that ever long to love last no more. And ye that are so contraries, and so coins of your heads, all a young thank that yearn to show, and teach some tokeness of true life crafts. Why are ye so lewd, that's all the lost welds of other elves you demon me, to dale your daysons to hearken? For shame! I come hither single and sit, to learn at you some game. This teaches me of your wit, while my lord is fro hame. In good faith, quoth Gawain, God you forbade, Gret is the good glay, and garment me huge, that so worthy as you wold win hither, and pine you with so pover a mon to play with your knights. With any since countenance, he tevers me as, but to the torvay to myself true love expound, and to which tames of tweets and tale of arms, To you that I wot well is more slight, of that art by the half, over 100th of sage. And as I am there ever shall in earth that I live, it were I fully fulfilled my fray but my troth. I will to your twining worship my might, as I am highly beholden, and evermore will. Be servant to yourself, so save me Drichton. Thus him freyers that fray enfolded him oft, for to have women to hold, what so show thought else. But he defended him so fair that no fat scenes, then on evil nor nother hap, nother that wist in blood base. They laughed and liked long, at the last show come and kiss. Here lived fair Conchot Fong, and went her ways, I wis. Then roofs him the rank and rises to mass, and seats in hoard dinner was dight and dearly served. The lad with the ladies liked all day, but the lord over the lawns launched full oft. Sweat his unsenly swing, the swings beat to the bonk, and broke the last of his breaks to the bakes in sunder. There he bowed in his bay, till a bellman had braken, and made him magroof his head for to moo utter. For fell flowns their fets when the folk gathered. But yes, Stephus to start by the sounds he make, till at the last he was so mad he might no more ran. But in the bass he might speed to a whole winds, of a rasp be a rock, then rends to a burn. He gets the bonk at his back, begins to scrape, the froth femmed at his mouth, unfair by the wipes, with his white tush, with him that irked, all the burns so bold that him bestoden. To nigh him unfairen, but nay him durst for woth. He had hurt so many beforn, that all thon then full loth, be more with his tush torn, that rem was and brain at both. Till the knight corn himself, cashioned his blanc, see him bide at the bay, his burns beside. He lights Lufleisha down, and leaves his courser, braids out a bright bronze, and vaguely forth strides. Founds fast through the forth their fell bides. The wild was war of the Wye with weapon and hounds. Here highly the air so headerly he fnast, that fell furred on the freckless fell him the whir. The swine sets him on the say even. That the burn and the boar were both upon hips, in the whitest of water the war had the other, for the morn makes him well, at that May 1st. Set sadly the sharp and the slot even, hit him up the holt that the hare schneidered. And he yarns him yelled and yelled down the water full tight, that Bramley con him bite, and burns brought to the brands, and dogs to death and died. There is blowing of praise and money, Burnham. Hey, hallowing and high with the hathers that might, Bratchet spade the best and bidden the maesters. Of the Shane John's chas there were chief hunts. Then away that was upon woodcrafts to unlace the boar luffy business. First he hews of his head and on high sets, and Sethan runs him all roped be the rig after. Braids of the bowels, Brent's horn on glad, with bread Brent's ferreth his bratch reward. Sethan his Brigtons out the bride and broad shelled, and has out his hassless as hastly business. And yet how hashes as whole the halves together. And Sethan on a steep stung, stoutly him hanged, now with this ill swine, the swang into home. This boar's head was born before in Selvin, that him fortheard, and the fourth drew force on his horn so strong, till he say Sir Gawain, and haul him that full long. He called, and he come again, he fees to fong. The lord full loud with lot and laughter merry, when he say Sir Gawain with solace who speaks. The good ladies were getten and gathered the many. He shews them the shells and chaps him the tail, of the largesse and the length, the litherness also, of the word and the wild swine, and wood where he fled. That other knight full comely commenced its deeds, and praised his as great prize that he proved had. For such a brawn at best, the bold burn said, no such sides of swine say he never are. Then Hondel say the hog head, the handed mon had praised. And let loudly thereat the lord for to hear. Now Gawain, quoth the good mon, this goman is your owen, Be fain born and fast, faithfully you know. It is soft, quoth the say, as a seeker true. All my get I shall you given away be my troth. He hands the hathel salute and the halt hemly kisses. And ever sons the same he served him there. Now are we even, quoth the hassel in this eventide. Of all the countenance that we knit, I siven come hither below. The Lord said, by Saint Giles, ye are the best that I know. Ye've been rich in a while, such chafferin ye drow. Then they tell but tasseled trestles aloft. Guesting close upon, clear lights men, wakened be woes, waxen torches. Such set and served in sala boots, much glam gigant in therein, about fire upon a flat and not fail wise, at the soper and after money athel songs, and contoots and Christmas and carols new, with all the mannerly mirth that mon may tell. And ere lovely the knight's lady beside, such semblance to say, seemly homemade, with stale soul and countenance but stalwart to please, that was all for wondered there was the way, and wroth with himself. But he knowed not for its nurture nor her nanus. Both dealt with here and dainty, howsoever the day turned to rest. When they had played in hall, as long her wheel home last, to chamber he come call, and to the chimney they passed. And there they drunken and dalton and them nay, to ignoring on the same note of New Year's even. Both the knights craved leave to care in the morn, for it was nay at the term he had to shoot. The Lord him let of that, to lang him recede, and said, as I am true say, I am seeketh my troth. That thou shalt achieve to the green chapel, thy chairs to make. Oh, we are having a cat interruption. Hi. And hold the choose, chongs with the chevisance, be thy char hither. For I have phrased it in the trees, and faithful I find thee. Now the third time the best, thank on the morn, may we marry while we may, and mine upon joy. For the lore that made mon lash when home on life's, this was the gravely granted and Gawain is langed. Blithe brought was him drink, that they so to bed yidden with light. Sir Gawain lies and steps full still and soft all night. The lord that his crafts keep, for early he was dight. After mass a morsel, he and his men token, merry was the morning, his muncher he asks. All the hathless that on horse should helden him after, or bow and bust on her blamps, before the hall yates. Fairly fair was the fold on the forced claims, and the rude reedle on the rack rises the sun, and full clear cast the clouds of the welkin, hunters and hardled be a holt said. Rochers ringen by rye for the brood of her horns, soon fell in the foot of their fox bade. Trails of traverse be traunt on her while, I cannot trace thereof on the hunt on him calls. His fellows fall on him, too, the fnasts full thick, runin forth in a rabble in his right fair. And he fistes him before, that found in him son, and quem they saw him, with sights they suit him fast. Rerand him full wetterly and with noise, and with he trance and tourneys. Yes, Pounds has to interrupt. And with he trance and tourneys, through money 10 grave, Haveless and Herkness be hasteful oft. At the last bit a little ditch he laps over a spen, stells out fully stilly, with a strothrand. When haft wilt of the wold with white wiles for the hounds, then he was went ere he wist to a whale tryster. There try a tro a trish tras him at once all grey. He benched a yane billety, and stiffly start on tray, with all the woe on the live, to the woads he went away. Then was hit loff upon list to lengthen the hounds, when all the mutes had him met, manged together. Such sorrow at the sight they set on the hay, as all the chamberons, clipped hats on the heads. He was holden with this him betten. Loti was yained with yarn spetch. There he was threatened oft that called, and the tilters of his tail, that tarry he ne might. Oft he was running as when he was raked, and oft relied on yains Reynard was relayed. And ye he lad big Lamon, the lord and his many, on this manor by the mounts could mide under, while the hen's knights at home homesily slept, within the comely courtesies of the cold morn. But the lady for loath let not to sleep. Near the purpose the pair that plighted her hearts, but rose her up radly, raked her thither. And a merry mantle met to the earth, there was furred full fine on fells well purred. No hues gout on her head, but to haggard stones, traced about his tresor be 20 in clusters, her thriving face, and her thrown all naked. Her breast bare before and behind deck. He comes within the chamber and door and closes hits her after, waves up a window upon the white calls, and Radley thus rehates him with her rich words, with chair. Ah, Mon, how may thou slip? This morning is so clear. He was in dropping depth, both then he comes her here. Oh, hi, Ocean. I hope your premiere goes well. In Dre dropping of Dram drabbled that noble, and moan that was in mourning of money the thoughts. How that destiny shewed that day, Dellen his word, at the green chapel when he go mets. And behooves his buffet, abides without debate more. Both Quen, that comely corn, he covered his wits, singers out the sweetness, and swears with hast, the lady lovely come laughed and sweat. Fell over his fair face, and fetly him kissed. He welcomes her worthily with a well chair. He say here so glorious and gaily attired, so false of her features and so fine hues. White swellened joy warmed his heart. With smooth smiling and smolten they smitten into mirth. That was all bliss and bunchen that brake him between and win. They lost words good, much well and was their end. Great peril between them stood, neath Mary of her knights conmene. For that priceness of priests depressed him so thick, nerned him so knave the thread that night him behoved. Of her latch there her flaft, of her lovely refuse. He cared for his courtesy, less thane he were, and more for his mischief, if he should make sin. And be traitor to that talk that telled aught. God chide, quoth the shalk, that shall not befall. With loof laughing elate he laid him beside all the speeches of specialty that sprang of her mouth. Quoth that burns the burns Blarney deserve. Ye left not that leaf that ye lie next, before all the wise in the world wounded in heart. But if ye have a lemon, a lever that ye likes better, and fold in faith that to fray fresten to heart, that you lessen me list, and that I live not, and that ye yell that I may truly, I pray you, for all the loofs upon live, lay not besought for gear. The Lord said, the knight said, By Saint John, thy smoothly con ye smile, in faith I weld right non, did non I weld with while. That is a word, quoth the wight, that worst is of all. Both I am sweared for sooth that swore methinks. Kiss me now calmly, I shall come heathen. I may not but mourn upon mords, as may the much lovely. Ze can't ho sway, don unseemly kiss. And Seaton ho servers him fro, and says as he stands, Now dare at this departing do me give me somewhat of thy gift, thy glove if it were, that I may mine on thee, Mon, my mourning to lessen. Now, wise, quoth the way, I would I had here the leviest thing for thy love I in long dwelled. For ye have deserved, for sooth, silly oft, more rewards be the resound that I wishish might. But to dwell ye drew that doubt both naked. It is not your honour for half at this time, like love for a garrison of Gawain's scrips. And I am here in errand and urds uncouth. And I have no men with no males with menstrual things. That mislikes me, lady, for love at this time. Each token mon as he is tan, tas non ilden pine. Nay hands of high honours. Quoth that lips underline, though I had not of yours, yet shield you have of mine. How racked him a rich rank of red gold works, with a stern stand aloft, that bare blue shawns brems of the bright sun. Wit you well, it was worth well for whole. But the rank it remade, and readily he said, I will no gifts forgo to my gay at this time. I have none you to norn, no what will I take. How bed him full busily, and hear both words, and swear swiftly by his oath that he sets not, and how sorry that he forsook and said thereafter, if you renay my rank to reach for its ends, you would not so highly holden be to me. I shall give you my girdle that gains you less. How lot straight lightly that leg under her sides, knits upon her kirtle under the clear mantle. Garrett's hits was of green silk with gold shaped, not spots round braiden, and betten with fingers, and that hoe obeyed to the burn, and blithely besought that it unworthy were that it would take. And he nay that he old nay in no wise, neither gold nor garrison got him grace send, to achieve the chance he had chosen there. And therefore I pray you displease you not, and let's be your business, for I bade ye it not never to grant, but I am dearly to you behold, because of your semblance, and ever in hot and cold to be your true servant. Now forsake ye the silk, said the bird then, for it is simple in myself, and it so well seems. Lo, so it is little, and less it is worthy. But whoso knew the cost that it are therein, he would hit praise at more praise peradventure, for quat gom is so gored with the green lace. While he had hemly hushed a boots, there is no hathel under heaven to hew him that might, for he might not be slain for slights upon earth. Then cast the knight, and it come to his heart. It were a jewel for the jeopardy that him jugged were, when he achieved the chapel the check for to fetch. Might he have slipped to be enslain, the slet's word noble. Then he fooled with her threat, and thought him to speak, and he bore on him that bet and bed him to swithe. And he granted, how him gaff with a good will, and besought him, for her sake, to sever not hit never, but to Lily Lane for her lord. The lewd him accords, that's never while shy should hit why, a wise, but that they twain for naught. He thanked her, oft full swithe, for through with heart and thoughts, beyond that thrine scythe, how his kiss the night so taught. Then latches ho her sleeve, and leaves him there, for more mirth that moan that might ho not get. When he was gone, Sir Gawain gares him some, rises and reaches him in array noble, lays up the loaf lace the lady him wrought, it hit full holdily that he hipped nond, seeth in chevely to the chapel chooses he the way, previously approached the press, and prayed him there, that he would lift his life and learn him better, how his soul should be saved when he should say heathen. There he shruffed him sharely, and shewed his miseries, of more in the mine, and mercy beseeches. Of the absolution he on the say calls, he assoiled him surely, and set him so clean, as Domesday should have been dight on the morn. And he assailed him and seethen he mason as merry upon frae ladies, with comely carols and all kin's joy, as never he did bought that day, so the dark night, with bliss. Ochimon had dainty there of him, and said, I wise, this merry he was never are, sin he come hither as best. Now him lang in that lee, there live him bird-side, yet as the lord of the land, the dawn had strong. He is fair in the spots that he followed along, as he sprent over his span to spy the shrew. And there as he heard the hounds that housed him swithe, renowned come Rishons through a rough grave, and all the rabble and the rest right as his hells. The wise, the war of the wild was rarely abides, and braids at the bright bronze at the best casts, and he shoot for the sharp and should have are fared. A rash rapes him to right, ere he might. A right before the horse fets they on him all. And worried beswily and wroth noise, the Lord lights Billy, and lashes him some. Raised him full radly out of the rash mouse, hauled his hay over his head, held his fast. And there ban him mony brath hounds, hunters hired them, better with horns full money. Irish at hands, right, that they the rank sayin, for thou wouldst come in his company noble. All that ever will be bugle blowed at ones, and all this other howled that had no horns. It was the myriest mute that men had ever heard. The rich words that there was raised for renowned shall with lots her homes that they reward. Her heads that they fawn and fraught and seethen they renard and treven of the coats. With mirth and ministry, with mets at Horwell, they made an as merry as many men moten, with laughing ladies, with lords of boats, Gawain and the godmen, so glad were they both. But if the dudes had doted over drunken ben other, both the mon and the many men made money japes, till the season was saying that they sever most. Burns to our bed, behoved at the last. Then lowly his lev at the lord's first, fushes Stramon, fair him thanks. Of such a silly sojourn as I have heard, your honour at this high fest, the high king you yelled. You have shown me on for yours, and yourselves light, for I most needs as you would, mave to mourn, and ye may take some to tesh at the height. The gate to the green chapel, as God will me suffer, to tell on New Year's Day the dome of my words. And God faith, quoth the good man, with a good will, all that ever I you high, hold shall I ready. There assigns he his servants, and set him on the way, and continue him by downs that he dreadish had. For the firk through the feath, and fair at the gainest be grev. The Lord Gawain can thong, such worship he would him wave. Then, at though the wait is long, the knight has ta'en his lev. With care and with kissing he carps him till, and fair through fawns thongs he threats him to have. And they yelled in Moyane, yelpy that ilk, they bekend him to crease with full cold singings. Seethens of many he mentally departs. Uch that he met, he made him a thonk. For his service and his solace and his serpine, that they with business had been about him to serve, and which say a sword to sever with him there, and they had wont worthily with that one ever. Then with lades and lights he was ladled to his chamber, and blithely brought to his bed to be at his rest. If he not sleep soundly, I say dar I, for he had much in the morn to mine, if he would in thoughts. Let him lie there still, he has ne'er that he sought, and you will a while be still, I shall tell you how they wrought. I need more water. And this is why I have a pitcher. Now nigh the new year, and the night passes, the day drives the dark, the Drigton bids. The wild weathers of the world waken their roots, clouds cast and cleanly to the cold of the earth. With nigh Ignoff in the north, the naked to ten, the snow snitted full snards, but snaped the wild. There were blains winds swept to the full high, and draw dale full of dreets full great. The lewd listened full well, that lay in the bed, that he looked his lids, full little he slept. Booch cook the crew he knew well for Stephen. Deliberately he dressed up ere the day springs, for there was light in the lamp that lammed in his chamber. He called to his chamberlain that cuffly him swayed, and bid him bring him his broonie and his blanc saddle, and that firks him up and fetches him his weds. And grapes Master Gawain upon a great waist. First he clad him in his clothes and called for to wear, and seeth in his harness, that holdly was kept, both his paunts and his plates picked full clearn. The rings rocked full of the rouse and his rich bruni, and all was fresh as upon first, and he was fain as then to thonk. He had upon each piece, which full well and wonk, the gayest into Greece, the full burn bred his bring his blanc. While the blankest was, he worked upon himself, his coat with the connaissance of the clear works, inured upon velvet virtuous stones, about beaten and bounded and broad in seams, and fair furred within with fair pillars. Yet laughed he not the lace, the lady's gift, that forgot not Gawain for good of himself. But he had belted the bronze upon his bell haunches, then dressed his jury double him about sweetly swethels upon his sang sweetly that night, the girdle of the green seek that gay well beseemed. Upon that royal red cloth that rich was to show, both weared not the ilk why for the metal this girdle. For pride of the pedants that polished they were, and that the glitterans glod went on ends. But for to save in himself when suffer behoved, to bide bail without debate of bronze him to wear off knife. But that by that the bold men bound, when his fair out belive, all the many of renown he thonk his awful rive. Then was Gringolet grave, the great was and huge, and had him St. George savingly in a silker waist. Him laced prick for penates, that prudes his his ven, and why wins him to wisten and sly, and said soberly to himself and by his sort swears, here is a many in this mote on men's good thanks, the mon him maintains, joy he mought have. The live lady on life, live her betide, if they for charity cherish on a guest. And held in honour in her hands, the Hathleham yelled, that holds the heaven on high, and also you all. And if I might life upon lawns let any quill, I should reach you some reward readily, if I might. Then steps he into the stirrup and strides aloft. His shock shoot him and shailed, on shoulder he had lot, gourds to gringolets with his gilt hails, and he starts on the stance that he no longer prompts. He hath on horse was Ben, that bare his spear and lance, the castle to creased I ken, he geft it a god's chance. The brig was braid down, and the broad yachts, unbarred and borne open upon both have. The burn blessed him by, and the braids passed, praised the porter before the prince nailed, gave him God and good day that Gawain he save, and went on his way to way one, that should teach him to torn on the 10 place. There the rueful race he should resay, and that bowen bay the bonks that bar and brer, the clomben be cleaf the clear and cold. The heaven was uphalt, both ugly thereunder. Mist moved on the moor, molt on the monts. Which hill had a hat, mist hackle huge. Brooks be led and breck be bringin' a boot. Shire shat around on shore that was showed. Well a while was the way at there they be wood shoulden. That hid was some sun, that the sun rises that tide. They were on a hill full high. The quiet snow lay beside. The burn that wrought him by bed his master abide. For I have won you hither why at this time, and now nar ye not far from that note place, that ye had spine and spurred so specially after. But I shall say you forsooth, sithen I know you. And ye are laid upon lie that I well love ye. Will ye wirch be my weight, ye worth the better, the place that you peace to full perilous is holden. There wants a why in that waste, the worst upon earth, for he is stiff and stern, and to strike lovelies, and the more is he any mon on middle-eyed, and his body bigger than the best pharaoh. That are in Arthur's house has Sir other. He chebs the chaunts of the chapel green. There passes none by that place so prude in his arms, that he ne dings him to death with deans in his haunt. For he is among Methes, and mercy none uses, for be it churl other chaplain that by the chapel rides, monk other mass priest, other any mon else. Him thank you, at him to kell as quick to himself. Fourthly, I say thee, as Sothie in saddle sits, come ye there? Ye be killed, may the knights rid. Trow ye met truly, though ye have 20 lives to spend. He is one eats there full yore, on bent much bear at brand. Again his did sore, ye may not you defend. Fourthly, good Sir Gawain, let the gome one, and goes away some other gate upon God's have, cares by some other keith that crease mut you spend, and I shall hie me no yen and head you fear. I shall swear by God and all his good halls, as help me God and the Hallidam, and others enough, that I shall let you lane, and lost never tell, that ever ye floundered to flee for freck that I wis. Grant mercy, quoth Gawain, and Gershuntu said, well worth the way that wolds my good, and that lily may lane I live well thou wolds. But help thou hit never sold, as I hear past, founded for fear to forthflay, and form that thou tells. I were a knight coward, I might not be excused, but I wile to the chapel for chance that may fall, and talk with that ilk, talk the tale that may last, with heat to well other woe as the words liked that haft. Thou be a stern nape, to cycle and sad with strave, full welcome dreeked in shape, his servants for to save. Marry, quoth that other man, now thou'rt so much spells that thou wilt fain on thee name it to himself, and leaves thy life, the let I ne cape. Have here thy helm on thy head, thy spear in thy hand, and ride me down this ill crake beyond rock side, till thou be brought to the bottom of the Bram valley. Then look a little on the land, on thy left hand, and the borlach burn on the branch that it gets. Now fares well on God's half, Gawain the noble, for all the gold upon ground I nold go with thee. Ne bear the fellowship through the firth on foot fair, bit the wye on the wold winds the brattle. Hit the horse with the hills as hard as he might, leaps him over the lawns, and leaves the knight there all alone. By God's self, quoth Gawain, I will not agree thee none. To God's will I am full bane, and to him I have me tone. Then girds he to Gringlet and gathers the rake, shoves he in by a shore at a swale side, rides through the rough bonked right to the dale, and then he waited him about, and welled him thoughts, and say nor sing of resets besides nowhere, but high bonks and Breton other half, and root knockled gnars with knockled stones. The stews of scouts skeins him thoughts, then he hoved and withhold his horse at the tide, and off challenged his chair the chapel to set. He say non such in no side, and sally him thoughts, save a little on the lawns, allow it were. A ball bear be a bonk, bremen beside. Be a four afloat that freckled there, the born boobered therein, as it bordled had. The knight catches his cable and comes to the law. Knight's flown leftly, Adeline's tashes, the rein and is rich with a broad branch. Then he bows the bear about hit he walks, debentide with himself, with quatty might, hit a had on the end and on either side, and on overgrown with grass and gloats anywhere, and all was whole within about an old crave. Over a crevice, over an old crag, he could hit not them with spell. We, lord, quoth the gentle knight, whether this be the green chapelle. Here might about midnight, it was still his Martinus tell. Now wise, quoth Gawain, his sea is here, the orchard is ugly with herbs overgrown. Well besands the wye, brooksold and green, del here's the ocean over the devil's wise. Now I feel a hit and fend in my fit wise. That has stoken me in the Stephen to stry me here. This is the chapel of mischance that check bitted betide. Hit is the corstus kirk that I come in. With the high helm on his head, his lance in his hand, he roams up to the roof of the Rochwans. Then heard he of that high hill in a hard roche, beyond the broke in a bonk, a wonder Bremen knows. Beyond quats, it clattered in the cliff as a cleave should. as one other Grindleston had ground a scythe. What? He warred and wet as water a moulin. What? He shrooshed and wrong and wroth the hair. Then, be God, quoth Gawain, that gare, as I trow, is reached at the reverence me rank to met be wrote. Let God worsh, we lieu. He helps me not a mote. My life that I forgo, dre nos dos me to lot. Then the knights con call full high, who sightless in the stead me Stephen to hold. For now is good Gawain go on right here, if any way else win heater fast. Other now over nether, his nades to spade. Abide, quoth on the bonk above in his head, and thou shalt have all and hast with the height ones. Yet he rushed in that road with rapely a throw, and with quetting a wharf, ere he wold light, and seaton he covers a crag and comes a hole, rolled out a row with a fell weapon, a Dane's axe needs white, to dint swift to yelled, with a borched bit spanned by the helm, filed in a feeler far fault large. It was no less to be that lace that lammed full bright, and the gome and the green scared at first, both the lyre and the legs, the looks and the beard, save the fire in his fault he found on the earth, settled the steel on the stone, and stalked beside. When he wants to the water, there he weighed node, he hooped over his axe in orderly strides. Brumley broth on a bent that was broad about on snow. Sir Gawain knights con met, he ne lute him nothing low. That other said, now so sweet, of Stephen moan may the throw. Gawain, quoth the green gome, God the mote look. A wise that art welcome why to my place, and thou hast time that travels true unshield. And thou knows the covenants cast us between. At this time 12-month thou took at the failed, and I should at this new year reply the quite. And we are in the spele verily overwon. Here are no ranks us to ride, rail at us flights. Half thy helm on thy head and half their ply. But no more debate, than I the bed then. When thou whipped off my head at the wap one, nay, by God, quoth Gawain, that me go slants, I shall grush the no grave for the gleam that falls. Both sightle upon the stroke, and I shall stand still, and warp the no wearing to rush as the lights nowhere. He lands with the neck and lute, and shewed that shire all bar, and let us he not jutes, for dread he would not dare. Then the gloam and the green grated him swithe, gidders up his grim toll, Gawain to smite. With all the burr in his body he burst hit aloft, munt as mottily as mar him he wold, had as driven a down as dray he addled. There has been of his daint and doddy was ever, but Gawain of that concern glift him beside, and as hit come glidad, a dune on glid him to shade, and shrank a little with shoulders of the sharp urn, and other shalk with the shoons and shades with aids, and then reprieved he prince with many proud words. Thou art not Gawain, quoth the gom, that is good heaven. That never art, for no here by hell ne be val. And now thou fliest to fare ere thou flee harms. Such cowardice of that night couth I never hear. Nor falkly flicked I ne flag frake, quin Tom mightest. Ne quests no cavilation in King's House Arthur. My head flaw to my foot, yet flat I never. And thou, hair and harm my hands, ours in my heart. Wherefore the better burn me burns be called therefore. Quoth Gawain, I shouldn't once, and so will I no more. But that though my head fell in the stones, I could not hit restore. But busk, burn, be thy faith, and bring me to the point. Deal to me my destiny, and do it out of hand. For I shall stand be as strong, and start no more, till thine axe have me hit. Half here, my troth. Half at then, quoth the other, and heaves it aloft, and waits as wrothly as he would were. He minced at him mately, but not the mine rinds, withheld headily his blondes, it ere hits hurt might. Gawain gravely hit bides and glanced with no member, but stood still at the stone other stub altar, that rattled in the rush grounds with rotes 100th, then merrily empty Conimel, the moan and the gran. So now that has a thee heart's whole hit me behooves, how'st know the high hode that Arthur the rot, and keep thy cannel at the cast, it yfid kever may. Gawain full grindly with grim then said, Why, thresh an, throw mon, the threats too long. I hope that the hearts are with them, Owen Selwyn. For sooth, quoth that other frick, so felly thou spects, I will no longer unlet him thin earns right now, than toss he in street to strike, and frowns us both leap and brow. No more vey that him mislike, that hoped of no restow. He lifts lightly his loam and lets him down fair, with the barb of the bites by the bare neck, though he hard-headedly hurts him no more, both snert him on that side that severed the hide, the sharp shracked the flesh through the shire grease, and shen blood over his shoulders shot to the earth. And when the burn set the blown blank on the snow, he spirit forth spent foot more than a spare length, hence headerly his helm and on his head cast, shot with his shoulders his fair shield under, braids out a bright sword, and bramly he speaks. Never sin that he was a bird born of his mother. Was he never in this world why so half a blithe? Blin, burn of thy burr, beded me no mo. I have a strike in this steed without strife hence, and if thou reaches me any mo, I readily shall quite, and yelled yetterly again, and thereto ye treast and foo. But on strike hear me falls, covenant shop right too, festned in Arthur's halls, and therefore handled now who. The hathel held at him fro and on, his axe rested, settled the shaft upon shore and the sharp lens, and looked to the lord on that lawns yelled, how that doughty dreadles deverly their stons, arms full alls and hurt him lives. Then he melees merrily with such much Stephen, and with a ring-dog word he to the ranks said, Bold burn on this brand be not so grindle, ne mon so unmerrily that misbold and habs, ne kid both as covenant and king's court shaped. I height thee a stroke, and thou hit has, held the well played. I release of the remnant the rights all other, if I deliver had bene the buffet parenter, I could throw the lock half wear it, to though half wrought to anger. First I mance the merly with a monton, and rove the wife with rough sore, with right I the proffered. For sward that fest in the first night, and thou truestily the troth and treely me halds, all the gain that me give out good mon should, that other months of the morn, that mon I the proffered, thou kissed my clear wife, the crosses me rots. For both two here I the bed, but two bare mints both shade. True mon true restore. Then thou mon dread no waith, and the third thou failed for, and therefore that's half the day. For it is my wed, and that is my that wears, that ilk woven girdle. Mine own wife hit the waved, I wot well for sooth. Now I know well thy causes and thy costas alls, and the wooing of my wife, I wrought hit myself in. I send here to assay thee, and soothe thee to me thanks. On the faultest freck that font and ever on fault yelled, as pearl by the queet pass of priest more, so is Gawain and God faith, by other gay knights. But here you lacked a little, sir, and lutes you wanted. But that was for no wild work, no wooing nother. But for ye left your life, the lass I you blame. That other stiff mon in sturdy stalled a great while, so agreed for green he grayed within, all the blood of his breast blended in his face, that all he shrank for shame and the short talked. The form word upon fold befrake me led, coursed worth cowardsy and covety both. In you is villainy, and vies the virtue distrees. Then he caught to the knot and cast laws, braids brothily to the best, to the burn Selvin. Lo, there the falsing, Foul mohit fail. For cale thy knock, cowardice, me taught, to accord with me with covety, make hind to forsake. That is large and lewity, that longs to knights. For now I am thoughty and false, and fair it hath been ever, of treachery and trothy, both betide sorrow and care. I beknow you, knight, here still, all faulty is my fare. Let me overtake your will, and eft I shall be your ware. Then laughed that other lewd, and liftly said, I had hit hardly whole the harm that I had. Thou art confessed so clean, beknown of thy misses, and has the penance uphurt of the point in mine egg. I had the policy of that plight and cleared as clean, as thou hadst never forfeited suthen that was first born. And I give you, sir, the girdle that is gold hemmed, for it is green as my gown, Sir Gawain, ye may. Thank upon this ilk throop, there fouth forth rings. Among the priceless of price, there is a pure token of the chaunce of the green chapel of the chivalrous knights. And ye shall in this new year again to my wounds, and we shall revel the remnants of this rich feastful ben. There laughed him fast at the lord, and said, With my wife I wen, we shall you all accord. That was your enemy ken. Nay, forsooth, quoth the say, and cessed his helm, and hast hit offendly the hathel thongs. I have sojourned sadly, so lay you betide. And he yelled at you, that yar yarts all menskes, and commands me to the cortes your comely fee. Both that on that other mean honoured ladies, that thus hit or knights with orchestre me noitingly beguiled. But hit is no fairly though a full maid, and those wiles of women be won into swore. For was Adam and Erd with one beguiled, and Solomon with fair sail, and Samson of stones, Dalida daft him his worst, and David thereafter, was blended with Barsaby, that much bale bethold. Now these were wrath in her wiles, if there were an win huge, to love him well and leave him not, alludes that couth. For thus were formed the frayest, that fouled all the sail, excellently of all thighs, over under much heavenly sheath that mused. And all they were bewild, with women that they used, that I me be now beguiled, methink birds be excused. But your girdle, quoth Gawain, God you foraid, that will I weld with good will, with not for win gold, near the saints, near the sylph, near the sage pedants, for well in all worship, near the wonk worse. Both in seeing of my circuit I shall say it oft, when I renown remorse to my Selvin, the fault and the fantasy of the flesh crabbed. How tender here is to ents teaches of the flesh. How, and thus pride shall me preek for the prowess of arms. The loke of this left lace shall lathe me hearts. But I would you pray, and displeases you never. Sin be lord of the yonder lawns, but I have flent me. With you we worship, the why Hitto yelled, that upheld the heaven and on high sits, how Nornia yaur, right nom and then no more. That shall I tell truly, quoth the other then. Birch lacked had a cert I had in this land, though mights of Morgan le Fay, that my house langs, and costing of clergy be crafts well learned, the masters of Merlin money has so taken. For hast dealt dowry full dare summertime, with the connable clerk that knows all your knights at hame, Morgan the goddess, therefore it is her name. Well, is none so high hottess, that ho none can make full tame. How wains me upon this wise to your win hall, for to assay the skirdery, if it so twere, that's rends of the great renown of the round table. How wains me this wonder use wits to rev, for half to grieve to gain o'er and get her to die, with glutning that ilk gone of that glass leaf speaked, with his hide and his huns, before the high table. That how is that at home the ancient lady? How is that aunt Arthur's half-sister? The Duchess daughter of Tintagel, that dare bitter after, had after upon that Athel's mouth. Therefore I thee, Hathel, to come to thy aunt. Make merry in my house to many the levies, and I will thee as well, why, be my faith, as any yeoman under God for my great truth. And he nicked him nay, and he nods by the ways, they acklen and kissen be kennin of another. To the Prince of Paradise, and partin right there on cools, Gawain on the blanc full ben, to the king's burr boosted bold. And the knights to the anchor grain, wotherwald soever he would, while his ways in the world wow and no rides, on gringlets about the grace hath getten of his life. Oft he Herbert and house and oft all the routes, and money, adventure, and veil vankest oft, that I need height at time and tale to remain. The hurt was whole that he had hint in his neck, and the bleak and belt he beareth thereabouts, a belief as baldric, bounden by his side, loken under his leafed arm the lace with the knots, and certainly he was ta'en and teach of a thought. And thus he comes to the courts, night all in sounds, there wakened well in the wone that was with the great, that God Gawain was come and gain him he thought. The king kisses the knight, and whence else? The seeth and money seeker, the knight that sought him to hail. Of his fare that him framed, and fairly he tells, but knows all the costs with the care that he held. The chaunce of the chapel, the chair of the knight, the luff of the lady, the lace of the last, the nert in the neck he nicked and shoed, then he lots for his inute, and at the ludons for blame. He tends quen he should tell, he groans for grafe and grain, the blood on his face can mell, when he hit shoe for shame. The lords cut the lewd, and the lace handled, this is the bend of the blame I bear in my neck, this is the lath at the loss that I lot have, of courtesy and courtesy I have caught there. This is the token of the untruth that I am ta'en in, and I mot nets hits were vile I may last. For a mon made heiden and his harm bought and half ne may hit, for there hits ones as tash of twain wilt hit naver. The king comforts the knight, and all the courtals, laughing loud thereat, and laughingly accordin. That lords and ladies that longed to the table, which burn of the brotherhood, a baldric should have, a bend a belief him about of a bright green, and that, for the sake of that say, to swaits wear. For that was accorded in the renown of the Round Table, and he honoured that had, evermore after, as it is breathed in the best broke of a romance. Thus in archerous day this honour betide, the Brutus broke thereof witness. Seethen Brutus, the bold burn, bowed hither first, after the say and the stout was cessed at Troy, wise. Many honours here beforn have fallen such as this. Now that here be the crown of the thorn, he bring us to his bliss. Amen. And there we have it. The entirety of Gawain and the Green Knight, written by the Gawain poet. Thank you all for joining me on this very long poem. That was so long. All right.